Thanks for the warning. I would say there's two ways I'm going. One is very snarky and the other one's very serious. In a serious response, a lot of us record our classes so we can reflect and review our practice. This is
That's
the
great.
easiest way.
That's a great point.
That's a fantastic thing. But like the best way to collect evidence would be to go on Facebook and start collecting funny teacher memes, because people are making memes out of all of their errors. And they're really, in an age where we're so serious and frightened of this COVID, it's a really great way to have a laugh, but also kind of see the serious data you could collect out of it. Because if one person were making that mistake, it wouldn't be funny, but we're all doing it. So
Well, you made me feel good with your story. I mean, that's where that came from. It was a positive affect, oh my God. And it's not just me, huh? There's others. Okay.
But I would say, just as a side note, Benna and I belong to a different group called the Teacher Leader Fellowship Project out of Central Connecticut State University with Dr. Betty Sternberg. And a group has stepped out of that bigger group, and we've authored a monograph on the different perspectives of teaching in the pandemic that I think is due out toward the end of May, maybe around May 24th. And in that is the hope you're looking for. It's a very hopeful document. It celebrates all of the good things we've been doing and makes some suggestions about what needs to continue. I could actually, after it's published, maybe we can send a couple copies this way.
Oh, well, I'm sure we will.
Yeah, it's a really great community. If you don't know about the Teacher Leader Fellowship Program, it's a wonderful way to empower your educators to have a voice and showcase their talents. So, yeah. Down with high.
I was just seeing if we've checked in with Juan Julio. Hi there. Nice to see you. How are you doing, sir?
Very good to see you. Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to hearing the presentations. And I think, fellow New Yorkers on this call, I think it was interesting. The state commented that they never intended for school districts to think that a remote option was a requirement. So we were laughing in our county because I can understand one or two districts making that mistake, but how is it possible that everybody in the county made that mistake? So I think they're just realizing, but don't want to take any responsibility for that. So it's good news in a way, because we'll either have all asynchronous materials available for students that want to stay at home, or we'll just have the in-person option. So, that is really welcome news for all of our teachers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I wanted more of a relaxed session today for me, if no one else, because of what's going on here, and I wanted to just check in with everyone because I value this community, and so I have to say, on a personal level, the use of my own habits of mind is kind of being tested to the limit at the moment. So yeah, if we're going to start with Paul and Kimberly and the wonderful research that they've been doing, we can talk just a little bit about the iHOM Institute on EduPlanet and the direction that we can go with that. And then really just kind of share any ideas of interesting research that we want to get going within the group. So I just need to check the settings, Kimberly, to make sure that you can present, which I've just done. So.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Yes. There we go. Can we see that?
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Well, I'm Kim Alexander, and I teach 7th grade general science at Lewis Tim Porter, which is in Western New York. Dr. Vermette, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yes.
I don't know if everyone has met us.
Well, I'm along because Kim's letting me share her journey. I'm Dr. Paul Vermette. I'm been at Niagara University as a professor for 35 years, retired in May of 2020. But I had the good fortune of working with Kim the last couple of years, and now in this new experience, she has really done a great job with a thing called the dual objective, which integrates the habits of mind with the cognitive content. And you'll hear more. And I love being in a support role Kim. I just love it.
Thanks. Well, we figured we would talk about some of the past like kind of the storyline of how Dr. Vermette and I got into the projects that we're currently working on, just since we haven't really had a chance to meet everyone. So it did start with the dual objective. So Vermette and Klein in 2017 published this book called Group Work That Works, with this premise that effective cooperative learning requires a dual objective where there's a content goal for the day, but also an affective goal for the day. And when I actually learned about this when I was in Dr. Vermette's class in college, and he was always promoting the habits of mind, that should be your set of dispositions when you're thinking about your affective goal. And it by no means has to be in a dual objective. You could use, any other set of affective skills, but obviously we're fans of the habits. And so we've always written our dual objective prompts and vignettes and lessons using that. Just so, for example, one that my students did a couple weeks ago, the content objective was that they were going to construct an explanation for the theory of plate tectonics. The affective objective was communicating with clarity and precision. It was a jigsaw lesson. And so the cooperative learning piece was that they each had one piece of evidence that they worked in their first group to get really strong at, and then they switched groups and taught each other their piece of evidence. And so out of this dual objective that I became really interested in when I was a student of Dr. Vermette's, we started thinking about the New York State benchmarks. So in 2018, so the year after that book came out, for those of you who maybe haven't seen New York State's benchmarks, they released 3 social emotional learning goals, if you will, and it's for K to 12. But what's interesting is that they're not original. They are actually the Castle competencies, and they've just been reworded. So the first goal, developing self-awareness and self-management, really aligns to the first and second Castle competencies. The second goal aligns to the third and the fourth, and the third goal aligns to the fifth. And so when Dr. Vermette and I saw this, or at least not to speak for him, but when I saw this, I was a little bit frustrated because I was working really hard on aligning my curriculum to the habits of mind, and I didn't want to start over to align them to these benchmarks because I don't love these benchmarks, because I think they're a little bit vague and broad and unclear, particularly for, I teach middle schoolers, so they're 12. So they don't know what interpersonal skills are, like as a broad thing. That's going to be hard for them. Dr. V, are you going to just jump in and let me know if you want to? I'm going to keep going. Okay. So we started thinking about that, and actually we were sitting in a coffee shop, and I was like, I'm not going to stop using the habits of mind. I'm just going to keep using them, and I can prove to the state basically that I'm still following the benchmarks. And so that's what we did. We actually just made a model that crosswalks the habits of mind to those benchmarks, or to the Castle competencies rather. And so you could argue that these fit into different bubbles. We're not really trying to claim that this is the only way that this could be crosswalked, just that it's one way to do so. So we really felt like habits 5 and 16 really fit under the idea of self-management. And we see self-management as a precursor to the second Castle competency. And so we figured habits 1, 2, 6, and 7 would fit there. We figured that habits 10 and 12 would fit in social awareness, and that would be a precursor to relationship skills, which is where we've placed habits 3, 9, and 15.
Yep.
And both of those, we think, come before this idea of responsible decision making, which is where we've placed the remaining habits 13, 4, 8, 11, and 14.
If I can recap just for a second, Kim. Thank you. It was interesting because the whole idea of the dual objective was to integrate the affective, whether they're dispositions or the habits, they're in the lesson anyway, but this would explicitly tease them out. So for instance, a 7th grade science teacher could be teaching, and the kids could have a cognitive objective, be able to describe and explain the impact of a biome. And at the same time, they would learn to, or they would practice their ability to listen with understanding and empathy if they were working in a cooperative group. And the key to the dual objective, it doesn't make it stops making the disposition an afterthought or a separate entity. It integrates it, and it also calls for the assessment and feedback on the skill. And then in 2018, New York, it's not a tested mandate in New York State, but it's in the regulations that the schools will have a plan for effective education. So what Kim did with this crosswalk, she allowed us to create lessons which have cognitive drawn from state standards and now affective responsibilities and obligations that are aligned with the regulations. Kim, that makes sense?
Kim,
Yes, thanks.
what's the difference between self-management 1 and self-management 2?
Self-management 1 should say self-management / awareness. My apologies for that. So the first bubble is really, number 1 is really being aware of yourself, and then number 2, managing yourself. So
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. And what's really interesting is that New York State has also done a lot of pushing for culturally responsive.
Yes.
And they're
Yes.
talking about culturally responsive in relationship to the, social and emotional learning, all of which still fits in the way that you're looking at the habits of mind. So I find it interesting that they're trying to come up with so many labeling systems when life could be a little simpler.
Benna,
Yes.
if I can, Dr.
Yeah.
Kelly, the Castle been around since in 95 or so. So their self-awareness, their 5 were the product of their research. Of course, the habits are the product of yours. But we also had some difficulty disentangling self-awareness from self-management, because the whole reason you want to be aware of yourself is so you can manage yourself. I mean,
Right.
so when Kim did this crosswalk, the whole thing came together. This is a year after the book and a year after the state mandated a plan. And these just lay out nicely, and all the work she's going to explain that she's doing in her own classrooms uses the 16 habits in a very, very beautiful way. And now here we are in almost May, and the students know these and they've used them, and she'll explain. But it's just so much easier to work with the habits and all your history, the 20 years that you guys put into making these make sense. We really thank you, if you will.
Yes, I mean, we definitely thank you. And so that was the plan was the plan was for students to continue working with the habits of mind. And so we never really intended to show them this model, because this model was more for us to keep track of progress monitoring. And so the students were continuing to learn the habits of mind as they had been before, and they already had great buy-in with that, and they were familiar with some of them. And so even into future years, we were going to continue using the habits. And then this was really for like the teacher to keep tabs on if New York State needed us to provide some, which they haven't yet, but if we needed to provide some sort of portfolio or assessment or data to show that we are meeting those benchmarks, we were arguing that we are, and here's the proof. And so I can prove that my students can make responsible decisions because they think flexibly and take responsible risks, so on and so forth. And so the reasons that we were promoting this, it really wasn't just about because the kids were familiar with habits, but also we just felt that the habits were stronger. Our biggest claim was that the habits have more accessible language. Again, my students are in middle school, and so they can really wrap their mind around 16 ideas, and they can really understand those 16 ideas. And the language of the habits, as I'm sure you've all seen, right, is language that we can use from K to 12. But some of the benchmarks and Castle language was very vague or very broad, or a little bit difficult for kids to come up with concrete examples for. And so based on that accessible language, we feel that the habits allow the teacher to develop more specific assessments. And so for Dr. Vermette and I, we actually created rubrics to go along with each habit. And then we are arguing that because
if you don't mind, I just can't help myself, because I'm looking at this and I'm saying, this is my journey. I mean, it's unbelievable in terms of those bullets. That is identical to the reason that we transitioned to the habits. But we transitioned from the 5 C's. So from a 21st century learning rather than an SEL. But of course, they're so intertwined anyway.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, sorry. Yep. So I'm just looking at this and going,
oh, perfect.
Oh, yes.
And we thought we weren't sure, like, exactly, we haven't met everyone that you know, we weren't sure exactly what everyone's background was. And so and I know not everyone's in New York State. So we kind of wanted to show you our progression of how we got, I mean, we are doing a case study right now, but wanted to show you how we got to this point. And so this
Isn't
is the
it
journey.
so wonderful though that, you know, across the other side of the world in an international
Yes.
school, you've kind of gone down an almost identical journey. So what do we say?
Yes.
Great minds think alike, Kimberly, can you say that?
Absolutely.
Bill, can I tell you a quick story?
Sure.
Okay, the Klein of the Vermette and Klein book was a middle school foreign language teacher. And these weren't designed, the dual objective wasn't designed just for middle school, but like Kim, she got very excited in it, got a job, and started playing with it in her classroom, and I'd visit and so forth. Eventually the book came out, but we did look at a whole variety of frameworks and
Right.
taxonomies. And there's two. One is you just said the 5 C's tied to the 21st century. We do mention them because some places like them. But Ontario, Canada is a province that has work habits and learning skills, and they put them on the report card, but they're not taught and they're not very well developed. They're sort of, oh yeah, put this on the report card, but they're not. The teachers don't attend to them at all. So.
Right.
So our Canadian students, which are a sizable size a sizable group at Niagara University, they're familiar with the process of being assessed, but not self-assessed. And
Right.
they never knew what those things meant. Okay.
Totally. Right. Yep.
They didn't know what they were. So we built off of that. And Kim's genius, when at the same time that the state came out and said, castles are, or the fake castles are framework, Kim was doing a crosswalk and had it all nailed down to how this could work. And, you know, I'm thrilled about it, but it's hilarious that the minds are working the same, quite a distance apart, by the way.
Absolutely right. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
So we built these rubrics. We built one for each habit of mind. And then based on that, if the rubric is going to be the assessment, having more specific assessments should have led to more targeted progress monitoring as well. And so we then figured that we could take those rubrics and use them to build student portfolios to track growth. And again, this would be more manageable than CASEL. So if you take the 5 CASEL competencies and actually look for sub-competencies, they have them, but there are 20 plus of them, and it's quite a lot for even the teacher to keep track of or to keep portfolios on, and let alone for the students to remember 20 plus different skill sets and how they fit into the other skill sets. And so we thought we could build portfolios for the students that looked only at the habits of mind. And again, if we were asked, we could track them back to the benchmarks.
Kim, just real quick. One other piece without, again, I don't want to delay it, but in a lot of places, people have programmatic or district-wide impact. I'm a teacher educator at a university working with 35 different districts. Kim's teaching in the middle school. So as the dual objective developed, we could do it with one teacher 1 year. It didn't have to be a K-12 or it'd be better if it was a P-12 progression, but it didn't have to be. And Kim really made that happen with this case study, because she said her principal said, fine, but it's not a district program yet. We got hope, but it's allowed in Kim's lesson, and I do teach it in my courses. So it doesn't have to be, we didn't think it'd have to be all kids in a school even. You know, it's the 7th graders you have, right, Kim?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so this idea, this crosswalk idea we did publish that just saying, here's the crosswalk and we think that this could be done, which led us into this case study that Dr. Vermette is referring to. So last school year, which would be the 1920 school year, we started a case study, and I had 100 students in 5 sections, 4 of which were inclusion. I was in the role of teacher, and Dr. Vermette was in the role of coach, but also an observer, because he was able to come down to the classes on Wednesdays. And so the plan was to roll out those 16 individual rubrics as exit tickets. And so students would complete the rubric, and they would actually self-assess how well they had done on a particular habit of mind during that lesson. And then they would give them a score out of 10. And then the teacher was also tracking scores. And so in these portfolios, we had some student assessed scores. So the child saying, I think I had a 9 out of 10 today, compared to the teacher saying, I think Johnny had an 8 out of 10 today on that scale. And we were
Can I
hoping
ask
to
a-
look for growth.
Sorry, can I ask a
Sorry.
question? Can I ask a
Sure.
question, Kim? Yeah, sorry, I was just fascinated
Thanks.
with these individual rubrics. So am I understanding this correctly when you've actually got 10 different performance descriptors for each?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll show you one. I think it's coming. It's
Right.
it's coming up somewhere, but it is, so there are 3 targets for each. So one rubric is on one habit of mind. There are 3
Yep.
targets and then 3 levels for that target. And
Right,
so if you got straight 3s, you'd have a 9. And then we ask students to justify why they deserve that score, and they pick up their 10th point through that justification.
okay, I apologize if I was jumping the gun there.
No, it's okay. I'll show you, and then I'll actually give you the foreshadowing that we have also since this edited the rubrics and
Okay.
improved them in year 2 of the study. And yeah, but we wanted to look for growth. And then the plan was for students to be able to reflect on their portfolio. So we were keeping tabs of these scores in a portfolio, and we were going to, at the end of the year, have students look at their portfolio and then set a goal and choose one habit of mind that they wanted to work on during a final PBL project that we do on environmental science at the end of the school year. And then we were going to have them set the goal and then reflect 2 weeks later how well they had done on improving on that habit of mind during the project.
Yep.
This case study is currently under review. And so the year-long roadmap that we had was in September, I systematically introduced each habit of mind. And so we actually got all 16 introduced in the month of September. They did 1 a day. They got a rubric for it for the first time. In October, we revisited each habit of mind, and then I started teacher evaluating. These scores had nothing to do with their grade in my class, just so you know. So we were keeping these portfolios on the side, but it had nothing to do with their actual grade in the course.
Another quick question, Kim. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry, but I'm
No, you're good.
fascinated and I don't want to forget these as we go
Yes,
through. So when you were introducing these, are you still introducing them though in the context of the unit and the project, or in a more general way?
Yes, no, we're doing it through the stool objective. So each day
Right.
still has a science objective. The second day of school in 2019, the second day of school actually was just a habits of mind day. It was the only time that we just did like, hey, what are these? What are they all about? Why should we care? What are we doing? That there was 1 day on just that. But every other time it was within the context of a lesson. And so I would often say at the beginning, like, so we're going to do a lesson on blank. The skill of the day is questioning and problem posing. Like, let's talk about that. Here's what I'm looking for. Here's what you're going to do. We would
Right.
go through the lesson and they would reflect at the end. And so we were teaching it as we went, and then in those cooperative learning groups, really kind of circling it back around. So if they're doing something and I say, oh, you're supposed to be working on communicating with clarity today, like, are you communicating with clarity? Like, how could we get better? So you're kind of teaching it as they're doing that.
So you're making those goals absolutely explicit to the students
Yep.
at every step of the way.
Yes.
Right. Yep.
Yes. In November to April, the plan had been to increase the amount of choice that was offered on the habits of mind. So basically from November to April, I would say, okay, you can choose between habits number 2 or number 4 today. And I was starting to give the students goal, like slightly increasing choice of which goal they wanted to work on for themselves. And so we didn't start with, okay, now you can pick from all 16, but we started with one option. So I would give them 2 habits of mind at the start of the lesson and say, hey, we're going to do some group work today. Pick one of these that you're going to focus on. We'll go through the lesson, and at the end you'll reflect. And then we increase that number to 3. Here are 3 goals that you could choose from for today, etc. And then May and June would have been used for that portfolio review, where the students would choose one habit of mind to work on for a sustained inquiry project. Of course, this was in 2020, and so none of that actually came to fruition as planned. So we did continue the case study, and actually we're really excited about the results that we got post-COVID, but I did want to show you, this had been the original plan for the case study. We got to March following the plan, and then we changed the plan. But just so you could see, so here's one of the example rubrics that we had. It has been, we've changed it now for this coming school year, this school year that we're in. And so we've made some improvements, but the ones that we were using at the time, they all looked like this. And so there was 3 targets for each habit of mind. They're only doing 1 a day. And then they could score themselves excelling, valuable but limited, or not yet there. And they would just circle which one they felt like they aligned with. let's see, I'm going to, just for the sake of the scoring, I'll show you what the next part looked like, and then I can come back if we want to see each piece.
Kim, I think
Yes.
people probably are looking at that and eager to really study it. Are you going to
Sure.
share the PowerPoint so everybody can get it?
I would love to. That's what I was thinking. Maybe I was hoping if you guys are okay with me not reading you each of the descriptors. I know you don't need me to read them to you, but we would be happy to share it with you.
Yeah.
I
If you
just
send
have
that to.
Sorry, Ben.
Philip, go ahead. You do it.
No. I was just very curious again.
Yes.
Is this something that you developed from scratch, or did you draw on some of the existing work that's been done out there?
We developed the rubrics on our own, obviously based on the habits of mind, and we were trying to incorporate this growth mindset idea, with like number one being considered not yet developing, but we didn't really reference.
The reason I ask, Kimberly, is that I don't know if you've met Henry Toy, but of course, he's worked with Benna for many years. He was actually the one that visited my school, and he was developing, or has developed, these competencies, habits of mind competencies, and again, look so similar.
I did not know that. Okay.
Right.
That'd be awesome.
And again, it's another example. I mean, Henry's in Singapore.
Okay, great.
And he's thinking on the same lines. So again, and I'm sure we'll have many opportunities to speak, but this is again similar to the work we're doing here with looking at the dimensions of growth. So kind of even atomizing those habits even more so to what they actually look like in a specific unit of study, and across the 5 dimensions, to actually move away more from a more general approach to, this is what it means to manage your impulsivity. But
okay, great.
Phil, Kim really did a great job when we were bouncing around the idea of the rubrics, and then it all clicked. So I would have used your words, from scratch, but it's a 3-level rubric, which was something we really talked a lot about. And the first one is not yet, as Kim just said, it's a growth mindset thing. No, I don't wait. I just talk, that kind of thing. But then the other 2, we went for a 3-level so we could distinguish between superb and good enough. And that's the labels we got here. But when the student does her self-reflection and Kim does reflection, they look at what they did that day very specifically. You used atomistic, and that's exactly right. Today I tried not to rush, but when I was working on this, I did rush. And they can think through their behavior metacognitively in a way scaffolded by the rubric wording, and that's a big finding, I think. So I'm very interested to talk. Henry Toy, is that the name you said?
Henry Toy, T-O-I.
I'll be happy to introduce you if you want.
Yep.
Yeah, I made a note. I'll
that
write
would be great.
Kim and
Thanks,
Paul,
Dana.
I'll introduce you.
That would be great. Thank you.
I'm thinking, Phil,
yeah,
maybe this is a library that we could put in our EduPlanet, have a library of rubrics that people are using.
Absolutely, yes.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah,
sure.
I think that would be a good idea.
I mean,
so I'll contact Henry and have him send his stuff to you. I think you have it, but if not, I'll make sure he does. Yep. And also introduce Kim and Paul. And that way we'll begin to build some of the work that's going on.
And again, this is absolutely the goal of this community, to build on each other's work. And a lot of the time, that we want to stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So we don't always have to start from scratch. But again, I'm just intrigued by this because, again, it's the same line of thinking for you to say managing impulsivity, but there's so many ways that can manifest itself. Right. And actually, sometimes, depending on the content, you actually want that to look slightly differently. Also, you've started here at the grade 7s, but that cohort of students, when they go into grade 8 and then ultimately high school, you're going to be wanting them to take that to the next level, right? So actually, the bar gets set higher Now, again, that is tied in with the work that James Anderson is doing as well,
Right.
because he's actually looking at those bars at, you know, the different complexity levels of authentic performance as well. And just a final note before I don't want to monopolize, is, you know, that looking at these, you know, these are largely focused on the dimension of growth of application. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's the one that means that. But of course, that there are the other four as well, which link into that. So to go, not only do I do this, am I aware of situations in which this will be beneficial? And I'm committed, I value it, and I'm committed to setting goals for the future and tracking that. So, you know, this is where you can atomize this even more, you know, across those habits in particular units and across the dimensions of growth.
Right. Right.
Let me jump in here for a moment with this rubric. I think it's very important that students learn to be self-analytical at those times when they are impulsive, for example. For example, a student says, I know that I should take my time, but this is difficult. Well, what makes it difficult for you? Very often, the management of impulsivity is comes when you're emotionally upset. So what do you do to calm your emotions so that you won't jump in without saying something or rushing? In other words, the rubrics themselves are wonderful. Accompanying the rubric should be a student self-analysis. What is it about me that makes this difficult? What is it about me that I can deliberately achieve it? So that the students are becoming more self-aware and self-analytical. It's through the self-discovery that the rubric, I think, gains a lot of value. It's not only an assessment for the staff and teachers, but it's also a way of students analyzing and learning about themselves.
Good.
Yes, thank
Thanks,
you.
Art.
Thanks. Art.
And we would, I mean, and that's something that I think we could that's something that I think that we could look at when we consider this part. So to get that 10th point, we ask students to justify their response to that. And it could be, we could definitely actually target this a little bit better. But we're looking for them to pull evidence from class to explain to us why they believe they deserve that score. And so they're just writing a couple of sentences. Here's what I did today, and here's why I think I did a great job on this habit, or here's why I didn't do such a great job. And these were actually quite revealing. It was really interesting to see. I think Dr. V and I, at least I know I was quite surprised. The honesty that we got was amazing.
Yes.
And again, this didn't factor into their grade, right? So there was no harm in them saying, I'm a 4 today. I really just wasn't on my game. And they gave us some really interesting reflections, which was nice.
Well, you're way ahead of me, and I just should have waited till I saw this slide, and then I solved it all.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. I think that it's a great point. And I think it's something that the justification, I think, is something we could actually edit in the next round.
I think, Kim, the thing that Art was, to piggyback on what Art was saying, I think the thing that would maybe help this is that use evidence to explain. It might be show strategies that you use.
Okay.
Because I think it's the strategies that really are what matter.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of what Art was pointing at also, which is, you know, it's not so much that I can justify that I did it, but that I have something that I could transfer to another situation because I'm becoming aware that I'm more strategic in my thinking.
That's very intriguing. You got to think about how to work that into the daily work. Kim, you do conference with individual students about this at times. So, you know, not every day, every kid, but you do talk to them and use the word conference as a verb with them about their reflections, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's there, but it's anecdotal as opposed to
right. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not on the form, so I think we could. I absolutely think we could do that, and I think it would be great because I think a little more structure for these would help them as well.
Yep.
And I think it would help them with this idea of improving, right? So if you didn't have a strategy, maybe that's why you struggled. Like maybe we could show you a strategy and they could work it in
Exactly.
the following time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, I know. I love that.
And
I think the growth is right there.
so that, and I'm thinking in terms of the dimensions of growth, that's the value and that's the commitment, isn't it? Because when the students can actually see that thinking in this way is beneficial to them, right? So then they value it more, and that leads in a commitment to actually improve in that as well. So wonderful.
Yes. Okay, so we took those rubric scores and we were tracking, this is what the portfolio looked like. So for each child, we had one of these portfolios. And so I was actually logging these for them. And so I would look at what they had scored themselves. And if it was a student generated score, I put a little S next to it. If I had scored them that day, I put a little T next to it. And so obviously not every one of these boxes is filled because we weren't able to do every habit every month. In September, we introduced them all. In October, we hit them all, but then, things started to get a little crazy. And so we would do as many as we could, but we didn't quite hit every single habit every single month, especially when choice became offered, because then students on certain days were picking different habits of mine. But this is what we were tracking on. And then of course, after March, we changed the structure of the study. And so speaking of March, we ended up, so my school did, so we went fully remote when March hit. And then in the beginning, we had a very interesting model happening, as I'm sure many of us did, where it was kind of optional whether or not you went to school and things weren't really graded. And then once it became optional, like many weeks into this, once it became mandated, I should say, grades were pass fail. And so the structure of learning was quite different. Everything was asynchronous. I offered Google Meets where I would be online with the kids, but we didn't have them on a set schedule. And so some of the students only participated asynchronously for the rest of that year. And so it was quite an interesting period where everything was kind of in flux. And so what we did with the study is switched it over to doing habit of mind challenges on Fridays. And so the way that I kind of set up the distance learning in the era of COVID was that Monday through Thursday, students were working on some science assignment that they had to do, but on Friday, I would give them a habit of mind challenge that often linked to the science and sometimes didn't. And so these were all pushed out through Google Classroom, but we were giving them activities that were trying to enrich their learning and give them something to do. And, again, just remembering what it was like for them at the very beginning of the shutdown when no one really knew how long we would be shut down for or what it was going to look like. And so a lot of our students were quite concerned. Some of them we couldn't get into touch with. And so we wanted the habits of mind to really be important in reaching them and engaging them, and also as a tool for us to check in on their social and emotional well-being in this crisis. And so we gave them things like post your favorite uplifting quote on a Padlet and tied that into habit number 12. We were learning about rocks, and I sent them on a scavenger hunt in their backyard, and they practiced gathering data. One of the ones that I really liked was that we asked them to interview someone who was older than them about their COVID experience a couple of months into the shutdown, and they recorded a summary of that interview. And we used that one for listening with understanding and empathy to see, to have them practice listening to someone and hearing what it was like for them to be in this shutdown. And so every Friday for the rest of the school year, which we didn't know when we started this, that it would last the entire rest of the school year, it did, but every Friday we gave them something to do that tracked to one of the habits. So the results of the study were surprising in so many ways, but what we found in September when we first introduced all of the habits of mind was that there was actually a really small range of average scores. So like the average score on habit 1 compared to habit 2, 3, 4, 5 was actually a really narrow range, which could suggest that their talents were evenly distributed. It also could be that some of them were actually scoring themselves really consistently no matter what rubric we gave them. And so there were a handful of students that we did notice this was happening to. Particularly in September, maybe they were unsure of the habit, or maybe they were unsure of the rubric process or unsure of themselves. And so there were a couple of students who, for example, took like a solid 7 every single day, kind of just stuck to that middle column and weren't really sure how to like distinguish themselves. In September, the highest average score was actually on habit number 5, which I found surprising, and the lowest average was on habit number 7. And I'm a science teacher, so this is an issue for me because they need to ask quite a lot of questions. And so we started wondering, like, well, do they score themselves more honestly on a habit that they understand better? Do they actually not really understand habit number 5? And so they're just kind of all hitting the same mark. A low score for habit number 7 is consistent, though, with the fact that they did have some poor questioning skills that September. And we were doing this thing called the question formulation technique, a QFT, where students are generating questions rapid fire style. And they really did struggle with that in September. And it's something that we worked on all year. As we looked at the portfolios that we did build, so from September till March, we actually pulled out some key students that reflected some interesting trends that we had noticed in the group. And so student E7 was one of those students who was self-reporting similar scores all the time. No matter how many times we would try to intervene or converse or talk to them, they were just really comfortable with a certain score, and they would give themselves within 1 or 2 points the same score every single time. And so perhaps they struggled to identify strengths and weaknesses. Perhaps they didn't fully understand the habits or the task, or it could have been an effort that they were just really quickly trying to finish this. And so they weren't actually reading what was in front of them, but they were quickly circling and kind of going with the same answer every time. And so there was a subset of the population that we did notice this issue with. Student E3 was our model student who actually did have relatively consistent growth, and there was a subset that aligned with this same trend. So they had a score of 7, 4, 9, and 10 consecutively on habit number 7. So in those months, they assessed themselves on questioning 4 times, and the first time was a 7. Then they gave themselves a 4, then a 9, and then a 10. And so when we notice it's not a perfect trend, when they're not perfectly trending upwards, it's something to keep in mind was that the content is changing. And so it could be that some of the topics we did are easier for them to ask questions on than others. And so that day that they had and we know, right, that day they had a 4, anything could have happened on that day that they had a 4, could have been about the lesson or something entirely unrelated. Student B3 and a subset that followed this trend actually had this up and down pattern throughout the year. And so their reflections on habit number 7 were a 10, a 4, an 8, and an 8. And so this really got us thinking about how when we're isolating their ability to do a habit in one specific 40-minute block, there's countless variables that are going to affect their score for that day that don't necessarily reflect their understanding of that habit of mind. And so they could just be having a bad day. They could really be struggling with that particular lesson. And so there are obviously some limitations to our ability to interpret information about their understanding and their general growth from these portfolios. When we looked at the COVID data, the data we collected from the Habit of Mind challenges, we gave them a survey and just actually asked them, like, what did you like about using the habits of mind all year, and what would you have changed about the way that we learn the habits of mind? So this came out in June, right at the end of our school year. So they had done the rubrics from September till March. They had done the challenges from March till June. And we actually did get, the majority of feedback was quite positive. And the ones that were their suggestions were actually really, really quite doable, which was great to hear from them. And so kids were saying things, right, like it gave us time to reflect and think about what we did. It added new vocabulary, helped them learn how they could improve. They made you think and change just a little bit as a person. They liked finding humor in class. The things that they wished we had done differently, they wanted more time for the justifications. That was one of the big the big things that we noticed, that a lot of them felt very rushed. And this makes sense because we were giving these rubrics as an exit ticket. And so it was right at the end of class. There was only a few minutes to go. And it turns out students were actually wanting to write more to explain themselves better, but didn't feel like they had time to do so. Some of them didn't like the frequency with which they were seeing the rubrics. Some of them felt like we do these rubrics almost every day, and they didn't like that. One child actually suggested that we give a test at the beginning of the year to actually try to measure growth that way, which was kind of interesting.
So Kim,
And so when we looked at this for all the students that responded, the majority of them had really nice things to say about it, and that was kind of nice for us to see that they didn't feel there was buy-in to this. They actually thought that these were helping them, and they saw the value in them, and that was really great.
So Kim, if I may,
Yes.
Again, it's so awesome to see the similarity in thinking. So I don't know if you've seen any of the Habits of Mind journals, the work that I've been doing here, and that they were actually used in my research project, but some of the same feedback we got as well, and that is from the students and the teachers, that even doing them as an exit ticket, or actually we were tending to do them towards the end of the unit. Basically, it was too after the fact, as it were, and students were struggling to remember actually what they were really thinking and doing in that moment. So our next kind of evolution, and we don't really call them assessments, although they are to some degree, they're more activities. We're working on these in the moment, right? So to actually say that these are not burdensome, they don't require remembering things that were previously done. It's kind of as part of the concept. In the moment, they are actually writing about it as they are doing it. So one example of that was the Finding Humor one that I shared with the group.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to look at that.
Those are okay. That's what I was wondering, if that's what you're referring to. Okay.
That's like the next evolution of what we're kind of doing here. So that wouldn't have been at the end of the lesson, right? That's actually as they're reading that content, right? And just one thing there as well, because you'll see a 1 criteria rubric there, which was purely just the meaning. Actually, if you look at for Finding Humor, you will get probably 3 to 5, because we're actually looking across all the dimensions of growth. But we just decided to make this, how should we say, more streamlined, I suppose, less burdensome for both students and teachers, that we're only really capturing one of the dimensions at any one moment, even though in the unit itself, we're covering 3 to 5. Does that make sense? Because I think that when students are sitting there and with a huge rubric in front of them, as you've already said, that can actually be a little bit daunting. And A, they might not totally get what it is, and B, they might just rush through it because the bell's going to go, right, and they're off to their next lesson. So again, I think that, you know, you've definitely started at the same point as us, and I think some of your experiences are the same as well in terms of the feedback.
Nice.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's great. That makes me feel better. That's great. Well, so that case study, we closed that, and so I just wanted to show you that there's 2 little projects that Vermette and I have going right now. And this one is a little bit of a tangent, so I put this in just to mention that this is something that we're interested in, but then we are looking at continuing that case study. And so one thing that we've actually been doing is we're looking at vignettes and how they could be used to help pre-service teachers. And so this is coming out actually next month. And we have vignettes of lessons in grades 7 to 12 across the different contents. And so then we are providing an analysis of that. So they're like time-stamped lessons, right? So at 9:07, Miss Alexander greets the students at the door. At 9:13, this happens. And so then we have been analyzing those with 4 frameworks. So 1 framework per lesson. And one of the frameworks that we've been studying is the dual objective. But of course, we're using the habits of mind as our emphasis. And we mention that, of course, you could choose a different affective set if you would like, but we strongly encourage you to use this one. And culturally responsive teaching is actually one of the other frameworks that we look at here as well. So this is a project that we've got going on. And then this year was the 2nd year of the case study. They were adapted. So the plans that we had about what we thought the 2nd year would look like have been adapted since we have been hybrid. So I've been hybrid since September. We have edited the rubrics. And so I do want you to know that we're aware that we argued that the habits of mind are more accessible language, and then we wrote these rubrics that were very verbose. And so that didn't necessarily help students. And so the 2nd version of the rubrics have been cut down a lot. And so there's less reading on them, which I think makes it a little bit less daunting for the students. We are giving them more time to write the justifications. We are assessing less frequently, unfortunately, because I have reduced face-to-face time with them. So to actually do an exit ticket when they're in person, I only see them in person 2 days a week. But we are trying to incorporate them in asynchronous work as well. And so that's kind of what the year looks like this year for my students. This is a version of the rubric that I'm using this year. So same rubric, the same targets for managing impulsivity, but we've taken out the pieces that were explaining what each of the numbers should look like and really tried to make them a little simpler with, do I mostly do this? Do I sometimes do this? Or do I rarely do this? And again, just because we're looking for a snapshot of how they've done that day, the justification has not changed, but I think that we will be changing it. And I appreciate all your feedback on that.
Kim,
So this is what they look like right now.
I'm gonna pipe in. I'm gonna pipe in here. Has this started yet, or is this the plan?
This? Oh no, this is what they're doing this year. So the case study from last year is under review.
Only maybe that you could learn from my past mistakes. That
Sure.
we've definitely moved away from these frequency kind of descriptors, because
Okay.
what we have come to understand is that it's more about the actual strategies that are used,
Okay.
as opposed to how often they feel they're doing it.
Okay, that's good.
That's
Okay.
just something to think about, Kim, I would say. And here at my school, we dabbled with that, but definitely have moved away
Mhm.
from it.
That's what Dr. Kellick was saying too. That's good. That's very good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. We're looking at ways of improving on that case study, and I appreciate it. And I mean, are there any other questions or any other feedback that we would be happy to hear?
I would just comment that I am so impressed with your ability to adapt and persevere through like all of the changes we've had. And I think your students are really lucky to have you, because you kind of remain dedicated on growing them no matter what platform you're teaching in. And I just really have to say, as a fellow
Thank
educator,
you.
it's very
Thanks.
inspiring to see your persistence and your perseverance here. And I think you've done just a remarkable job. So well done. And I hope you enjoy a nice rest this summer. You earned it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, I wanted to add the same. I think it's so incredibly impressive how you really stuck to habits of mind in light of the new framework that was being imposed, and just took the time to do the crosswalk. And, you know, that really inspires me in work that we're doing in the district with MTSS and UDL, and,
Yep.
you know, just to make those connections rather than, you know, force in a new framework and have the teachers just lost and have a lot of good work lost. So kudos to you both. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thanks. Thanks, Judy.
I hope you will
Thank
also
you.
work with other teachers in the school, because your model is so powerful. It's applicable not only in science and 7th grade, but all grade levels and all subject areas. And so if you could create a culture in which all the teachers would see this integration, so that students would encounter the habits of mind repeatedly as they go from subject to subject throughout the middle years experience.
I'm going to second that, and I'm going to say that actually you should be promoted to head of curriculum. So is there someone I can
Thank you.
is there someone I can write to make that, you know, recommendation?
Thank you. Our actual head of curriculum does know about, I mean, I'm trying, actually, I appreciate that. I'm trying very hard to get others on board. And there is a small subset of people that are interested in what Dr. Vermette and I are doing and are slowly like becoming more invested in it. But unfortunately, it's not a a school-wide or even a grade-wide thing yet, but we are definitely, that is my dream is actually that it would be my entire district.
Oh, you're
I'm
going to
not in
get there. I can definitely tell
I-
that.
I'm
No,
excited.
and again, the similarities are just incredible. So without, marketing myself too much, it'd be great if you saw the interview that Claire Coop-Scott did with me.
Okay.
It's on the EduPlanet 10-minute Tuesdays. That's right, Benno. I think I'm getting that
Yes.
right.
Yes.
So she talks to me about my experience and journey with both understanding by
Okay.
design and the habits of mind. And you'll find out there we have
Mhm.
very similar beginnings. I'm a middle school teacher too. It's a great place to start it.
Okay, great.
I'm a social studies guy, but yeah, same starting place.
Perfect.
Um,
Perfect.
and
Well, I
so-
would love it if you could, I know you offered the EduPlanet ounce. I mean, I would love to be set up through that if I could with you.
Yeah, let me take that one up with Benna and Claire,
Okay.
because that's kind of
Okay.
still evolving in how we're setting this up.
Okay.
But definitely, Benna, maybe you and I
Sure.
could touch base
Yeah.
with Claire at some stage to talk about some of the enhancements that we would like, but also to get all of this group set up and have access.
Yeah, I think that, we can get them, we can get everybody in. I
Right.
don't know how rapidly the enhancements will take place.
Yep.
But certainly, I know Marcia said you wanted to get in, right, Marsh? Yeah. And Marcy, rather, sorry. And Kim and Paul, we'll make sure that you're all in.
Thank you.
That's wonderful, Benno. I didn't want to
Thank you.
make that call. You're the boss when it comes to EduPlanet.
Well, hey, you and I, we can push it and make it happen. So I think it's just a matter
I'm
of,
going to sign off. I have another meeting I'm going to with my son-in-law.
Well, you were an early starter, Art.
Yeah, that's right. That's it.
Art was here 30 minutes before the rest of us.
oh, okay.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
see you, Art. You take care.
Then I invite them to next month's meeting, if there is one.
Next Monday. Yeah, he's talking about that we have a regular third Monday of the month is our research meeting. Fourth Monday of the month, or no, first Monday of the new month.
Correct. Yeah.
There we go. First Monday of the new month
Yep.
is our regular meeting of all the people who are working with habits of mind. And
Oh,
if you'd
good.
like to be, we'll put you on those lists. And if you want to come, we would certainly welcome you joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
trying to, continue to build our habits of mind community, keep people informed and interactive.
Great. Great.
I just want to second, I think what Julio said is really important about sticking to your guns and being confident in what you do. Because there's so many different frameworks and standards that get thrown at us, right? And it's really important, I think, to not be whimsical there. There's good stuff out there. There's a lot of good stuff coming out all the time. But when you're looking at things like the next generation science standards and some of those cross-cutting concepts and science and engineering practices, you can look at those and just go, that matches to the habits as well. So yeah, all of that kind of crosswalking or doing those matrices is important, because you just don't want to be flipping every couple of years and what the focus is. Build on this work, introduce your teachers, your peers to it, invite them into your classes, get them to look at the student work, and that's powerful. And I think you'll very quickly see people wanting to adopt what you're doing, Kim.
So
Thank
it's
you.
time for us to
I-
close. This went beautifully, and we thank you so much for sharing. I think I put your research on the website, our website. Did I? Am I right about that? I think I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the crosswalk. Yes, the crosswalk is there. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can, everybody, if you want to find it, it's on the Institute website, that you'll be able, look under research and you'll be able to find it. Julio, did you want to say anything about NERA before, or no?
No, just honestly that the dates that we had were October 13th through the 15th for the specific dates. And we're working on the logistics with the committee right now before we just formulate everything. Basically, given that we're not entirely sure about what the presentation method is going to be, if it's going to be in person or if it's going to allow for hybrid. So we're getting that, and we'll circle back to everybody on that.
So just say what NERA is so that they know what we're talking about.
Marcy, you correct me because you've been on it much longer, but Northeastern Research Association. Did I get that right?
One word to add.
Okay.
Northeastern Educational Research Association.
Okay.
And so while it represents the Northeast of the United States as a founding concept, we've really have people from, I mean, Kentucky and Tennessee, for instance, and moving a little further west. And now we can encompass people from a lot further west or east or around the globe. And we want to make sure that by inviting panel members, we will be able to coordinate this in the best method. As we heard earlier, people were talking about hybrid being a really difficult boat to row. And so we just want to make sure it's the most convenient way to do this. And so we could get back with you with a few more ideas pretty soon.
Anyway, the point is that there's going to be a full panel on habits of mind and the research that's being done. So, you know, that's going to be exciting. And I think Art and I and Allison Zamuda are going to do I don't know what we're doing.
It's a webinar. You're doing a webinar in late September to launch then the panel discussion that will happen in October. Yeah.
So it's nice. It's exciting that it's getting a presence in a national research organization like this. And now that we have Cambodia joining us, it's an international presentation.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Paul and Kimberly. That was wonderful. I'm very happy that we didn't just restrict you to the 20 or 30 minutes. I think it was well worth. I think that's a good way. I don't think we should have tried to attempt too much. I think it's better to go in depth, right, in everything that we do and discuss. Thanks to all of you.
Exchange, that's for sure. That's great.
So yeah, thanks to all of you. As I said, it's quite a tough time here at the moment, but you guys continue to inspire me, and yeah, it's been really energizing actually to touch base with you guys.
Thank you so much.
We're here for you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, I will share the recording as soon as I can, and all keep in touch, and hope to see you all at the first Monday of the month.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Great meeting all of you. What an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Stay safe.
Thank you, Pat. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.